Welcome back. All right, so in light of Kirill Kaprizov signing an extension with the Minnesota Wild today, I wanted to compare it. I wanted to compare it to other contracts signed by big-name players and take a look at that and take a look at it by cap percentage. And I want to start off talking about where the cap is headed. So this year, it's at $95.5 million. Next year, it's at $104 million. The following season, $113.5 million. That's where the salary cap is headed. This is already decided. So the reality is that we're going to see the salary cap explode over the next couple of years. We're going to see guys getting paid a lot more money. And we know that when the salary cap goes up, that generally doesn't help your lower end players. They're still going to make $1 million to $2 million. Some of them $775,000 till the league minimum goes up to $1 million, and then they'll make $1 million a year. But your star players are going to get paid. That's the reality of the National Hockey League. I really think with the salary cap going where it's going, we're going to see that disparity between your top paid and lower paid players just get wider. So the limit for any one player on their contract is 20%. And I've never seen a player get 20% that I can recall of the salary cap. That's overall. So if it's a $100 million salary cap, that means you're eating up $20 million of that. Now, the limit for 2027-2028 will be $22.7 million as the cap hit. That's the limit. Obviously, nobody's going to get there, but we could see some cap hits in that same range as Kaprizov soon enough. So let's talk a bit about Kaprizov's. So it kicks in next year, and I think that's key too. This year, his cap hits $9 million, which we'll talk about what a bargain that is at this point in time. But when his cap hit kicks in next year, it is 16.35% of the salary cap. Now, roughly, that drops to roughly 15% in year 2 and drops to roughly 14.5% in year 3, which still sounds high, but it is worth discussing how much these guys are signing for and what the percentage of the cap is. So Leon Draisaitl, his contract kicking in this year, his cap hit 14.66% of the salary cap. One thing that I would say with contracts right now is guys who signed in 2020, 2021, in that range, they're going to be getting paid a lot less than guys who are getting paid based on, Kaprizov as an example, and other players who are going to get paid this summer. I think as fans, we get caught up with, well, this guy's cap hit is this much, so you can't give him more than that, rather than looking at just the straight percentages. So for instance, it's Connor McDavid. The first year of his contract, 2018-2019, he was eating up 15.72% of the salary cap. Now, if he signs for that exact same amount, if it's 15.72% that he's going to be getting paid of the cap, that means that next year's salary cap number for McDavid would be $16,359,200. So is it less than Kaprizov? Yes. But is it also a lot less than McDavid could make? Also, yes. So McDavid clearly willing to, share the wealth a little bit, quite literally. And that was done at the time with the idea that, hey, he wants to make sure the Oilers can put a competitive team on the ice. The weird thing to me is that it's a 15.72% for McDavid, 16.35% for Kaprizov, and that little tiny percentage difference, which adds up to, $1.5 $2 million, wherever, right? Once we get up to that $113 million, I don't feel like that's a huge difference overall. And if you look at Minnesota's cap structure, and we'll take a look at that, they're in pretty good shape. When McKinnon signed his extension, it was 15.09% of the salary cap. And that's interesting, too, because at the time, the argument was, why is McKinnon making more money than McDavid? I think it's $12.6 million is the cap hit for McKinnon, $12.5 million for McDavid, which ignores that the contract started 5 years apart. And I would hope that a guy signing a contract 5 years later can make more than the guy signing 5 years before, especially when they're comparable. And I would put McDavid ahead of McKinnon as well, for people who want to say that. But 5 years later, McKinnon should be worth more than what McDavid was 5 years earlier. Or else you're in a situation where the league's money isn't going up. Matthews, it was 15.06% of the cap went to Matthews the first year of his contract. Artemi Panarin in 2019, when he signed his contract, it was 14.29% of the cap. And Bobrovsky, the highest paid amongst the goaltenders, 12.27% was the cap hit in terms of the overall cap picture in 2019 when he signed that. And of course, Panarin and Bobrovsky are both unrestricted free agents this summer. Highly unlikely they make that kind of money again, but they cashed in. And that's the thing. McDavid has a chance to cash in this summer. And even though McDavid could play into his 40s, this might be the last chance he gets to get a really good long-term extension at a ridiculously high cap hit. So I don't blame players for cashing in at this point in time, because with the way contracts are structured, it's the only time you really can, because then you're in your mid-30s at the end of that contract, or in the case of Kaprizov, I think he's 37 when that contract's done. He'll get, a 1 or 2 year deal after that. Now, a couple to keep an eye on, both Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes are due in 2027. So for both Colorado and Vancouver, it would behoove them both to sit down with these players on July 1st next summer and just get it done. Just sit down and get it done. And my guess is the cap hit for both Makar and Hughes will be in that same range as Kaprizov's, because remember, theirs kicks in 2027. And in 2027, that $17 million is approximately 15% of the cap. So don't be surprised when Makar and Hughes are making in that $17 million region too. Kucherov's up in 2027, but he's 34 years of age. It is highly unlikely that Kucherov, even though he's very productive, will end up with a long-term contract with a cap hit nearing Kaprizov's. Although, could he get a 1 year deal at 11.5 or 12 million, somewhere in that region, to stay in Tampa? Maybe, right? Maybe a 2 or 3 year deal at a $14 million cap hit, something like that. But that's what we're looking at now, is players making a lot more money. And if you look around leagues in North America, hockey players are lagging behind other leagues, which makes sense since the NHL makes less. But at least now they're going to get paid quite nicely. So looking at the cap space for Minnesota next summer. So this is when that contract kicks in for Kaprizov. And they have $23,155,001 according to Puckpedia. So they still have $23 million in cap space. Their key unrestricted free agents, they have Zuccarello, Tarasenko, and Gustafsson are their key unrestricted free agents. There are no key restricted free agents up next summer. Buium is due in 2027. So if Buium ends up, living up to expectations, he's going to be pricey, but that doesn't happen until 2027. And 2027, they have $50 million in cap space in 2027 as of right now. That's even with the Kaprizov extension in place. And looking at this team's overall salary structure, they're in good shape. Boldy has a $7 million cap hit till 2030. That's a bargain. Rossi's at $5 million till 2028, and he has 1 more year as a restricted free agent as of 2028, so they can, maybe keep control of him or trade him out at that point if that's decided. Eriksson Ek makes $5.25 million till 2029, which is highway robbery by the Wild as far as I'm concerned. Brock Faber, $8.5 million until 2020 or 2033. And at this point, even if Faber fell off, even if Faber wasn't everything that Minnesota Wild fans hope he'll be, if his cap hits half of what Makar or Hughes is, it's not bad. With where the salary cap's going, it's perfectly fine. Spurgeon, $7.575 million cap hit till 2027. Brodin, a $6 million cap hit till 2028. So they're not in any real cap situation. The Minnesota Wild are not in a spot right now where they have to do major bookkeeping as a result of this contract. Looking at, for instance, Dallas with Rantanen. They got Rantanen extended, but it did cause them to lose some depth in the offseason. Minnesota should not have that problem next summer. In fact, with Kaprizov signed to a long-term deal like this, it should make them a place where somebody's going to want to play, especially if they let Zuccarello go. I believe Zuccarello's 38. So if this is Zuccarello's last year as a Minnesota Wild player, it means there's going to be a spot in the lineup where you might be able to play with Kaprizov. You might get a ton of points. That does make it an attractive spot for a free agent potentially next summer. And like I said, 23 plus million in cap space. They have the cap space to bring somebody in. Then looking at the points per game leaders since 2020, 2021. So looking back over the last 5 years, McDavid, 1.7 points per game. He has a $12.5 million cap hit. Kucherov, 1.55 points per game, $9.5 million cap hit. McKinnon, $1.51 million, or $1.51 million, 1.51 points per game, $12.6 million cap hit. There it is. Draisaitl, 1.45 points per game for Draisaitl, $14 million cap hit for him. And for people saying, well, that's a bargain now. Yes. And this is why you need to get players signed earlier. So, yes, Kaprizov's money's high, but now that bar's been set. And so for other players going forward, they can look at the Kaprizov total and go, we want to be in that range. Maybe other players don't get the 17 million, but maybe now there's going to be more guys who get in that 14 to $15 million range as a result of what Kaprizov's got. Matthews, 1.27 points per game, $13.25 million cap hit. Marner, 1.26 points per game, $12 million cap hit. Panarin, 1.26 points per game, $11.64 million cap hit. As I said, that expires this year. Pastrnak, $1.24 points per game, $11.25 million cap hit. I will apologize for the amount of times that I mix up the points per game and the $1 million cap hits, but it happens. Rantanen, 1.23 points per game, $12 million cap hit. And Kaprizov, 1.21 points per game. He has a $9 million cap hit this season, which is tied for 37th in the National Hockey League, which I think is low. And the funny thing is, at the time Kaprizov signed that contract that's paying him $9 million a year, that's the cap hit anyways, everybody said, well, that's an overpayment, because at the time Kaprizov had played 1 year in the National Hockey League. It was a really good year, but it was 1 year in the National Hockey League, and that contract worked out pretty well. You always see when a big contract gets signed, everybody comes out of the woodwork to say it's an overpayment, it's an overpay, this is terrible, what a ridiculous contract, player's not worth it. Happens every single time. And there's always the conversation about what this is going to do to Stanley Cup hopes. And honestly, for Kaprizov to stick around for another 8 years, obviously he's hoping this team can build towards being a Cup contender and potentially winner. And again, the percent of the cap that he's taking is not crazy. It's not a ridiculous amount. It means that for Minnesota, it's a good thing they got all these other contracts signed. One other thing I wanted to bring up is I've seen a few comments of, well, they're just going to buy it out. Eventually, it's going to get bought out. Oh, no. Contraire. Almost everything in this contract is bonus money. You cannot buy out bonus money. This contract cannot be bought out. I mean, technically it can. Yes, technically it can. But if they buy it out, they save nothing. So there's no point in a buyout for Kaprizov. And it is weird because this is a Minnesota team that has never really had that superstar player. The closest I think they've come is Gaborik before this. And now they've found a way to keep that superstar player. It is a contract that's going to give conniptions to some GMs around the NHL. But giving a player what they're allowed to get, and it is not that 20% of the salary cap that a player can take. I don't think it's a big deal for him to have 16.35% of the salary cap, but I do understand the sticker shock. When I woke up this morning and saw that 17 million was the cap hit, I wasn't overly surprised since he turned down 16 million, but yeah, 8 years, and then when you see how it's structured, it is a very Kaprizov-friendly contract. But when you look at where the salary cap is going, these contracts usually age well, and it's something I've said about long-term contracts. I've done videos on long-term contracts, and more often than not, the 7-8 year contract will age well for the team, and the player will eventually be seen as a huge bargain. I've used examples of Sidney Crosby. He had that, 12-year contract, which at the start of it, his cap hit was in this same region in terms of the percentage of the cap. And by the end of it, it's peanuts. And people are like, wow, Crosby's such a huge bargain, because that's how it trends. So I think this does show that the amount of money players are going to make is going to go up. General managers getting contracts done sooner usually save money. And so going forward from here, we'll see what this does to asking prices for other players. Guaranteed that Kaprizov's agent's quite happy today. Kaprizov's pretty happy, and there's some other players on expiring contracts that are probably quite happy to see how much he received. But that's my opinion at this point in time. We shall see how it all ages. I've also seen the comments on how he can't play a full season and he gets hurt a lot. And McDavid misses time with injuries regularly as well. There's been long-term injuries for Kucherov too. It's part of being a National Hockey League player, and obviously Barkov's missing the whole regular season for Florida. And I don't think anybody's going to say, well, Barkov's not worth his money now. So it's just it is part of playing hockey. So hopefully Kaprizov's able to stay healthy the full season, and the Minnesota Wild, maybe they can build up around this. They do have other players as well coming up, and I do like what Minnesota's got done here. The one question mark I have for Minnesota in the long term is they're really, really banking on Wallstead, and if Wallstead doesn't turn out, does Gustafsson stick around long term? What does Gustafsson's contract look like next summer? Because he's due for an extension, but they have over $23 million in cap space currently with which to figure it out. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. It's greatly appreciated. I will talk to you again soon.